Hello.
The storms were the most destructive in years and years.
A suburban Melbourne street pummeled by winds that reached 157 kilometres an hour. That's technically cyclonic strength.
It's been a wild week.
From Melbourne's east to the Mornington Peninsula. A drenching. Visibility at absolute zero. Here, a caravan towed by wind gusts down a suburban street and into a parked car. And all while Victoria was also battling bushfires. Multiple homes lost. Only the second time since the Black Saturday fires of 2009, they've declared a catastrophic rating. 5 firefighters injured.
Yesterday's power outage was one of the biggest Victoria has ever seen.
Let's get back to Hazel. Okay, a little bit more light here. Welcome to Hazel Devlog, Power Outage Edition. So I was contemplating what on earth to talk about in this week, because this week has been crazy. I've been like clearing fallen trees, trying to get power back online. We're about 5 days post-storm and there's still no power. So not the most productive week in terms of Hazel, that's for sure. But that's okay, because as I've mentioned, there is no shortage of topics that I need to catch up on and talk about. So whilst I haven't really worked on Hazel this week, I mean, I did a live stream on Monday on Twitch, and then Tuesday was when the storm happened. I thought that I could catch up on some of these topics that I haven't talked about. And this video is actually going to be the prerequisite to me. This is how deep this goes. Like, in order to get to the topic I want to talk about, I have to go through some other things. And I thought that, like, I mean, I don't even know if this works or not. So why not take you through what I'm about to do? And then that will lead into maybe the next video where we will do the thing that I originally wanted to do in this video. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's Hazel. Here's Prefab Sandbox. I'm sure that a lot of you guys who have been watching for a while probably recognize this scene. This scene has been here for a while. You can play it. You can shoot these, cubes or whatever. And the physics is a little bit wild. I think since we switched the physics engine to Jolt, I haven't really adjusted any of this, so it does definitely look a little bit wild in terms of physics. But this is like, when you download Hazel, this is basically what you get. This is Prefab Sandbox, which is the name of the scene. Over here, Sandbox, that's the name of the project. This ships with Hazel. So inside the Hazel, this is like the Hazel repository right here. If you go into Hazelnut, which is what this editor is currently called, inside there is this Sandbox project. You can see that it's inside the engine folder because it ships with Hazel. Now, aside from this, definitely requiring an update. What I want to do right now is I want to create a brand new project in Hazel, and I want to build a little scene with, I don't know, maybe like a little bit of functionality. It doesn't really matter too much. And then I want to be able to basically export it into a runnable game. So it's kind of like I'm going through the entire process of, I want a brand new project inside Hazel and I want to ship it. How does that work? Now, the reason I'm doing this, as I mentioned, is because it's going to lead into the next video, the video I wanted to make here today. However, doing that is actually kind of like a good point. Like, I haven't actually tested that in, I don't know how long. And this is latest Hazel. This is latest dev branch. So I guess let's see what's going on with Hazel and how that process even works at this point. So file create project is what I'm assuming will happen. So project name and project location. There is actually a launcher for Hazelnut, like for the editor, which shows you your recent projects and lets you create new projects. I think I used that when I made that like little rocket Flappy Bird kind of game, but I think we need to update that launcher. I don't think it really works, and most people just use this anyway. So I'm gonna call this devlog because that's why I'm making this project location. I'm just gonna put it into Hazel projects over here. It's called devlog. There's the full path. Cool. Let's hit create. Okay, it didn't crash. If I right click on the content browser and go show and explorer, this is like one of the first things I like to do, then you can see it's opened up, the right directory, dev Hazel projects devlog assets. And then this is like the starter content that apparently it's made. So we've got some, I think these are mostly just folders that are just here. I mean, we've got default meshes, which is good. Oh, this doesn't have my thumbnails. Yeah, because this is latest dev and I'm on my laptop. So the thumbnail stuff is all local changes on my desktop. Ugh, I'm so bad at this. But yeah, I mean, we've got some default meshes. That's always good. Textures, scripts, source. Yeah, like, so this is mostly just blank directories that are here to just assist us in making things. So I think we can make a scene if we want over here. We can call it something. So I'm just going to call this main. We can double click on it. And now you can see we've opened up the main scene and I should be able to make a whole bunch of stuff. Now, people always ask me how I learned programming, how I learned all the math that you need to make a game engine. What's the best way to do that? And I'll give you the 2024 edition answer. There are lots of ways to get started, but you should definitely consider for free the sponsor of this video, Brilliant.org. Brilliant.org is an amazing website filled with lots and lots of really high quality courses on various STEM topics, from things like computer science and learning programming if you're a beginner, all the way through to not just beginner math, but things like calculus. But unlike simply watching YouTube videos or reading books, the thing that sets Brilliant apart is the fact that their courses are extremely engaging, fun, and interactive. They'll present things to you visually, give you these widgets that you can play with to manipulate data and see what effect it has, and then they'll ask you questions about what they've just taught you to make sure that you're actually learning and retaining that information. They've got so much content that you can actually explore for free because they have a 30-day free trial that you can use to check out their entire platform and everything they have to offer. Just go to brilliant.org/thecherno and check it out for free right now. And if you do go on to like it, they've been nice enough to offer the first 200 subscribers 20% off an annual membership. Huge thank you to Brilliant.org, as always, for sponsoring this video and helping me pay for the fuel for my generator to make this video here. Thank you. Let's start with maybe like a skylight. I'm just gonna hit dynamic sky and you can see I'm cooking here. I'm making a game, I'm making a scene in Hazel, wonderful. I'm a little bit surprised that this hasn't crashed just because I haven't QA tested this in a while. And obviously we will as part of the next release, but the next release hasn't happened yet. So it's good that this is going, this is like seems stable in the dev branch. And then, okay, so I want a 3D model. So one thing I'm curious about is if I actually try and create it through this right click menu here, what on earth is going to happen? And the reason why I'm a bit suspicious is because, in order for this to work, I mean, first of all, I don't remember how this is set up. But also the meshes are in here and they're also, you can see their mesh source. And mesh source means that they are just, well, in this case, GLTF files. So these are not Hazel meshes yet. What that means, and like, I think this is important to understand because this is how Hazel works. And I think like I wanted to change this year, but maybe I should just accept that this is how Hazel works. All of these assets that you see here, they're actually magically imported. What that means is that if I go to like a different Hazel project, so like Script Invaders, which is a Space Invaders clone that we made, that Tim made, over here we have like other meshes. Now let's go into models perhaps. So here's like an alien FBX. I think this is probably the main alien that Tim made. So if I copy this and then I go back to say the source directory of what's in here, I mean, this is in default source. So maybe in meshes, I'll just make a directory called source and then I'll paste it in here. Then if I refresh this, then technically, if you go back, you can see that we now have meshes source and there's the alien. So it's basically auto imported it into Hazel. This used to happen automatically as well without even hitting refresh because we had a file watcher that was running on a different thread, but I think that was causing problems at some point and we just ended up disabling it temporarily, aka permanently. And the thing is, this isn't just like a file browser where it's like, yeah, these are the files on disk. Because obviously if you right click, go to show an explorer, there's the file on disk, you can see it. But no, if you go into view and asset manager, which is over here, this is like a little debug view I made just so that we can actually see what the asset manager thinks assets are and stuff like that. And actually you can even edit them. So over here, if we search for, like alien, then you can see like, here it is. It's got a UUID and everything. Like this is a valid Hazel asset as of right now. So it, and I didn't import it. I simply put it into the assets directory. And then when I refresh it, or if I close Hazelnut, the editor, and then I reopen it, and then it's going to obviously scan that directory and be like, oh, you've got a new FBX file or a new texture file. Let me just import that for you. So it basically happens automatically. Now, what about things like import settings, you may be asking? Like, what if I want to control how that's imported? Well, an FBX file or a GLTF file is a mesh source. Source because it's your source asset. If you actually want to use this, you basically have to import it in a way. I mean, it's not really importing it, but what you have to do is you have to create a Hazel mesh out of it, either a Hazel mesh or a Hazel static mesh. The way that you do that typically is you just try and use it. So if I go into like meshes and into source, and I just drag this alien into the scene, because this is a source asset, it says this file must be converted, which isn't really the correct language, into Hazel assets before it can be added to the scene. Not really converted, it's just what needs to happen is you need to specify how on earth you want Hazel to treat this mesh that you're importing. Again, there's that importing word, I guess, naturally coming up. And then what will happen as a result of that is Hazel will make an additional, more or less, metadata file called either .hsmesh for static mesh, or if it's a dynamic mesh, it'll just be .hmesh. And that is really just a YAML file that contains like the information that you've specified here. So in other words, it will still use that mesh source, like the GLTF or the FBX, that still is in fact containing all of the data. You still need that file. It's not like you import it and then you can delete the source file. No, it still references the vertex data, the material data, everything from within that mesh source. And that's good because every time if you're working on a game or a project and you're constantly re-exporting that file because you're working on it in Blender, this will pick up that. Because it's not like you have to re-import it or anything, if that makes sense. This is just the metadata that says, okay, I want to use these submeshes, or I want to use these materials, or it's a dynamic mesh, or it's a static mesh, or it's got skeletons that I want to use, or whatever else is inside this dialog. So for this example, if I don't want it to replicate the mesh hierarchy in here, I just want to kind of treat it as one entity that is that mesh, and it's a static mesh, doesn't have a skeleton, it's not animated, then static mesh is usually what you pick, and then this is where it's going to put it. So assets mesh is alien.hsmesh. So if I just hit create, you should now see that it has in fact imported that alien, and here it is. Now, what I'm going to do is let's scale this guy up a little bit. Let's make the scene maybe a little bit more interesting. I might make the skylight intensity a little bit less, and I want to add like a directional light just to give it some lighting. I can move that around if I want. You can see the direction that the shadow is being cast in. That kind of helps us see where the light is heading. So let me just kind of make something that maybe looks decent. Okay, and then I'm just gonna kind of stand in front of this alien, maybe like this, and I'm just gonna right click, create camera from view. Okay, so now it's created a camera hopefully from view. So if I hit the play button, you can see that it plays, and that camera obviously now it's using the camera entity we created. In fact, we can move it around if we want. And that's obviously the camera that we created from view. So nice. We've basically got a Hazel scene with everything we need. It's even got a directional light, it's got a skylight, it's got the alien mesh, and it's got a camera. We've set up an effective scene. So if I want to now ship this product that I've made, this beautiful product that I've made, how do I do that? Well, what I'm planning to do very, very soon is add a button here that literally will do like a one-click packaging distribution publishing button that will do all of what I'm about to do manually, but we don't have that yet. So buckle in, we're gonna go through the manual process of how to ship something in Hazel. So I'm a little bit nervous actually, because I haven't done this in a long time, which means first of all that I don't quite remember how to do it, but then also it might crash, so bear with me. So if we go file, the first thing we really need to do, I guess we need to build a shader pack. That may already exist, but I'll just do it just in case. Then we need to build a sound bank. There are no sounds though. So do we really need to do that? I mean, yeah, there are no reference audio source assets. Would have been fun to include something, but it's okay. And then we'll go file, I think build asset pack. And you can see project contains 2 used assets. There was a very brief dialog box that appeared, but obviously it's a very small project. 2 assets, 2 assets. Why are there 2 assets? Oh, right. It would be the source mesh, the mesh source, and then the HS mesh, the Hazel static mesh metadata file that we created. So that counts as 2 assets. Asset pack build done. If we actually take a look at the console here, you can see that scene has 2 used assets. Here it is, alien HS mesh and alien FBX. So it's serializing that asset pack into this HAP file. One scene. The scene would be an asset as well. but I guess scene has 2 used assets is what it's referencing. And scenes, even though scenes are assets, I think they're a little bit different because the asset packs are actually kind of split up into scenes, because usually when you want to load assets, you are inside a scene. So it makes sense to do that. When I first introduced asset packs and just mentioned in general that they were a thing, I kind of said that I would make a video talking about the format and how it works. Let me know if you want that still. It's been a while, but again, it is technically in my list of things to catch up on. But if you guys let me know exactly what is exciting to you and what you'd like to see, I'll prioritize that first. Okay, so we've got all of that. That's great. Now, if we go again to the main directory here, you can see we have that asset pack, 172 kilobytes. That's good. We need that. So now, if we want to ship this, what do we do? Let's go back to the code. And I think we can probably just save this and just close Hazelnut. And then over here, what we have inside this Solution Explorer is Runtime. And there's Hazel Launcher and there's Hazel Runtime. So we're going to focus on Hazel Runtime. I'll set that as the startup project. Let me just build that to make sure that it actually works. I'll just dock this back over here. And technically speaking, this should now be as simple as just pointing the runtime to the project and making sure that obviously the asset pack and the shader pack and everything it needs are actually present. So this is actually still exporting as saving captainchino.exe. So that's wonderful by me. That needs to be changed. That would be inside the target name over here, but obviously inside the pre-make. That was left over from the last Ludum Dare Game Jam game that we made. I must have committed that accidentally. So the point is that you open up this runtime application.cpp, which is inside this Hazel runtime. You've only got a few files really, and runtime application is one of the main ones. There's a lot of like just craft and leftover stuff here, but there's a project path that it's trying to load. By default, it's sandbox, or it can be a different argument. You can see I'm overriding it here as well. So the idea here would be inside here, we would want to set this to devlog hproj. Which I think if I just pointed to this directory specifically, so if I copy this path and then I set the working directory to be that path here, so now it's relative to that, I should just be able to write devlog. Did that have a space? Yeah, it did. Nice. Devlog.hproj. These are tiering settings, which basically like the graphic settings that you have set up. Obviously, that's not really a thing, but I can just make a directory like that. I think it'll create one if it needs to. Obviously, with games that we ship, we actually have like a launcher, which you can pick graphic settings in. That's not a thing for this little project here. Let's call this like devlog or something. So the idea is, to ship this game, you customize your application. This is kind of nice because you can do it in a flexible way. And you can see it's going to load the shader pack here. It's going to load the core assembly part. We don't actually have one, so I hope that works if we don't have, any C# functionality, because that's just a scene that renders that alien. The threading policy is going to be multi-threaded by default as well, because the runtime has a main thread and has a render thread. If we go into runtime layer now, because this might be a can of worms. So we've got some specific things here, I think. Game specific as well. This, definitely needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But the important thing here is, it's going to load the asset pack. And I actually don't remember how it does that because it needs to load the asset pack. Okay, so inside Open Project, inside Runtime Layer, it will load the asset pack, and you can see it's going to load it from the project directory, asset directory, and then the name of the asset pack, which typically is asset pack. So for example, over here, we have the assets directory, and then you can see we've got that asset pack. So it should be able to find it and load it fine. Now, the most important part I think here though is, because it's going to load that, is what scene is it actually going to load? And you can see that we have a load scene with a specific UUID. This is the only, this is like a little bit annoying, but basically inside the asset pack, inside this, shipped version of all the assets, there is no such thing as like scene names or scene file paths or anything like that. And so you can't just load it by file path like you would in the editor, you load it by the UUID. So we need to know what the UUID of that specific scene is, and that is somewhat manual. Now, if I had the editor open, I could just look at it in the editor. However, I can also just go into, I think, the asset registry, which is basically the same as that asset manager panel that I brought up inside the editor, but it's the actual source data, it's the YAML. And you can see we have main hscene and it has a handle here, and that's what the handle is. So if I copy that and paste it into here, it should load that specific scene now. should we hit play and see what happens? We'll run that and hopefully it will work. That would be nice. We'll see. Okay, failed to load shader. That's not good. It probably didn't load the shader pack, maybe. So let's go back to runtime application because it had a resources shader pack was the file path. Oh, right. Okay. So one thing I did forget about that is if you do in fact want to run it from within this directory and this is what you're shipping, you need to make sure that I think that it has the stuff that you used from the editor because resources is a directory that's relative to the editor. So this is Hazelnut. Here are the resources and there's a bunch of stuff here. Now, if you had used, I think, default meshes, which we didn't because we used that alien, then I think you have to do that. I think scripts as well, like Hazel Script Core, for example, which is like the core scripting library of Hazel. You have to make sure that DLL is there. And again, you have to do that manually because we don't have the one-click publish button yet, the magic button. But what we need is the shader pack because when we hit file create shader pack, this is what it did. It created this. So if I copy that and then I paste it into devlog resources, which is like my project directory, that should fix that shader issue. So let's see if this works. Okay, so that just crashed. And the reason why that crashed is because you can see it could not load the C# stuff. That's a little bit annoying because I mean, I guess mostly when we ship things, we obviously have C# there. Now, what I can do right now just to keep it happy, I guess, and fix it is probably make sure that I have mono and the scripting stuff inside my resources. So if I copy that over here and then mono, like where, I don't really remember where mono is supposed to be. Maybe just in the working directory. Let's see what happens now. Okay, that's good. It's progressing. Now it needs fonts, and we don't have fonts. So again, that's going to be in Hazelnut resources and fonts. So if I copy that and put it into resources fonts, because otherwise we have no fonts at all for the engine, and it needs to render debug text and stuff like that. And there we go. Okay, so can resize this, make it a bit smaller, but here we go. That's the scene that we made. You can see it's now in a standalone application. I think I can hit Control F3 to view like all the stats. That was one of the reasons why we needed the fonts. You can see all the information over here, and it'll probably be just waiting for VSync. That's why it's running so slowly. So yeah, I mean, that is the full process of how you go from just setting up a scene, a brand new project inside Hazelnut, inside Hazel's editor, and then building it into the runtime and looking at it here. Now, I will say that if you wanted to actually ship this, because I'm running it from within Visual Studio, it wouldn't really be that much different, I think. This is the path to the exe file. So if we copy that and then I'll paste it over here, you can see we have the binary that we just built. We need like mono, I guess, and I don't know if we need, probably don't need these things. Okay, let me build it in dist actually, because yes, we will need async and stuff in non-dist. So if I do a dist build of Hazel runtime. Okay, so now we've got the distribution exe. So that's all that's here. I mean, we can rename this to say devlog. And if we copy it, obviously you'd want to give it an icon and some metadata and stuff using like Visual Studio and whatever if you were actually shipping this, but this is the abridged version. If we go back to devlog, and because this is like the working directory that we specified in Visual Studio, if I paste it into here, I should just be able to double click on this and there you go. Okay. And that's the distribution build, which should basically work the same way. So that's it. That's the full process of how you go from 0 to hero in Hazel, from nothing, brand new project, to something that you can actually distribute and ship. Patreon.com/Cherno is how you can get access to Hazel, help support the project. And if you do so, if you make something in Hazel, like I just did, and you want to ship it, there's no royalties, there's no fees, there's nothing. You just ship it. So now that we have this beautiful alien, I think I have fulfilled my prerequisite for what the next video is going to be. So I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully I'll have power by then.